Welcome back, everyone, to the World Through Zen Eyes podcast. I'm enlightening here with...
I'm Dr. Ruben Lambert.
We are back with episode, I believe, number 8.
All right.
There will be a time when I stop counting, and that's getting very close. Apparently, I was told by one of our listeners, splendid podcast regarding our last podcast. However, 2 seconds in, Myung-An Sinim can remember that it was a third, not a second, Fenmail episode, and that's true. When I looked
Was it?
Yeah, it was a third one, and in my brain it was a second one. So you see how much of that it really is. You know, we at least do some really minor, if you will, preparation. And this isn't to say that we don't want to produce something well, but it sort of is the nature of the podcast, right? We kind of meander, as we say, and things come to mind as we do it. It's not sort of rehearsed. We have no rehearsal. Podcast prep, if you will.
It's sort of like if you were hanging out at a coffee shop with us.
Right.
And we were just eavesdropping.
That's right. And it's somewhere probably during the middle of the week, we'll say, hey, what should we do the podcast
By the
about?
way.
By the way, it's coming.
Yes.
And this is where the listener participation really is kind of nice and also unburdens, at least for myself. The basic principle really is, and in Zen in particular, that unless there's a question, you don't teach. Right? That's the purest kind of thing. So unless someone, meaning question means it suggests interest. Otherwise, the breadth of topics is so broad, so wide, so much stuff available, so many entryways and so many doorways and entry points and topics and things. So
we know Bulgyo or Buddhism encompasses the whole cosmos. We have, right, 84,000 sutras, which 84,000 is really not the extent of the sutras. It's just a number delineating a lot.
Right.
And so, yeah, I want to learn something. Well, okay.
What's the question?
Yeah, what's the question helps you zoom in on the point.
Right. So today's topic, belief. Again, one of these topics. So far, I think what we've done is synapses is what we do. Within the 1 hour or so of time, we really haven't the time to get into the things. So I'm sure at some point in time we're going to kind of come full circle and reincarnate back into the episodes that we started with.
Sure.
Patience, for example. And I mean, how much can we talk about patience? It's the self and the no self and the consciousnesses and such. These topics really, really are general topics. They're broad topics. And we certainly will be returning to them. It is also our hope that in what we say, let's say today we're going to talk some about belief. Hopefully a listener hears something, gets inspired by it, moved by it in whatever way, and then wants some clarification or some detail and ergo the birth of some new future episodes.
Right. I think that we're always open for someone to have a question, even if it's in reference to a prior episode. Right? It's very nice for someone to say, hey, you know, I heard you guys talking about patience and its function when it comes to BOP, the weather, the environment. Can you further expand on that? I like to go hiking and I want to further understand. For example,
Right.
you know, and we could definitely in future episodes, like you're saying, come back around and
I'm struggling with
elaborate,
such and such,
on the
whatever.
topic.
Yeah.
And if there's something going on in your daily life, you've encountered some difficult situation, and you're pondering about how I can change my mind about viewing this situation, or what kinds of techniques I can use to adapt to the situation. Sure, ask away. There's really no limit to the topics that we're willing to tackle and expound on.
Absolutely. That's where the fan mail comes in, and you could comment in the various platforms, and we'll hope to get to it. I think
we just can't talk about one topic, how to fix a bad hair day. That one's beyond our reach.
Oh,
I know
exactly how to.
I don't have any personal experience.
Wait a second.
No,
speak for yourself, mister. I know
All right.
exactly how to fix a bad hair day.
How's that?
A razor.
Just get rid of it, right?
I never have a bad
it.
hair day.
Just uproot the whole problem.
Never have a bad hair day. I'm always aerodynamic.
That is true.
So move through the world like Santa Claus.
That's
zipping because of the aerodynamic head. Yes, belief. I would like, before we jump in, I don't know, is it really before we jump in? I would like to extricate this term, belief, from its captivity by the religious sector. It seems to me, for the most part, when the word belief comes out, somehow the mind tends to immediately conjure up religious connotation, religious context, and with it, for those of us who have been burnt by religion, tired out by religion, our particular maybe religion, what have you, as is the common situation. People are wanting more, and the rigidness perhaps of religion is not suitable to this modern day, and so we have to have some adaptability. Anyway, no tangent. Belief. It is not a religious term, folks. Belief is how we operate in the day-to-day.
Yep.
Consider every moment from here on that I'm facing forward. I am facing forward and towards the darkness of the unknown. We don't know what the next moment brings. And so forward facing, we are facing belief. We are facing life with belief. That which we look behind us and, the experiences, those things, that is the knowing. Right? We've had the experience, we understand that. But the next moment is hinged entirely based on belief. We make a lot of presumptions and things like, well, I wake up in the morning and I'm going to be alive, for example. And I believe that. And so I made plans yesterday for the today. But the truth of the matter is, we have no guarantees. Furthermore, I went to sleep. I slept quite well. Why? Because as I was drifting off to sleep and I was looking up at the ceiling, and then I closed my eyes, and my eyes still closed and I still comfortably, and I sailed away on that caramel waterfall of sleep.
Yes.
Because I believed that this roof is not going to cave in the middle of my night.
Because we see also the complete opposite to be true too. For the person that puts their head on the pillow and they believe that there's some impending doom that's going to come to them in that very moment or in the future. Primarily it's the future, right? People get into this anticipatory anxiety state. They can't rest. They don't close their eyes because they actually truly believe that some harm will come to them, and their body and mind responds as if it were true.
Right. So we have that belief.
It's almost like
Is
the
it
power
good?
of creation and
Is it
destruction
good?
is within your hands. Is it good? Like I was just saying, like, what are you creating or what are you destroying?
That's right. So again, this idea of belief as a one-sided thing makes it a lopsided thing, and
Sure.
also I think that's why it is so heavily made into a religious thing because you believe in a thing, and that thing largely, has this one-sided connotation. But like you said, you could believe enough to cause yourself anxiety. You could believe enough to cause yourself insomnia. You could believe enough to make yourself physically ill. I mean, psychosomatic illnesses are a real thing, and they're rooted in the psyche. They're rooted in the belief.
That's all. That's a great topic. That's psychosomatic. There are so many anecdotal stories referring to that, and yes, it is very powerful. Yep.
So now that we have sort of rescued it out of its only purely religious connotation, we have to consider it that it exists in our day-to-day life. Everything we do. I mean, if you pick up a cup of coffee on your way to work, you are entirely in a state of belief that that's not poisonous, that it is in fact coffee, that it is in fact what you've ordered, that is in fact, shenanigans aren't going on in the kitchen.
You don't believe that it's poisoned.
Right.
Because if you're working with someone that suffers from delusions, I'll tell you, when they believe that somebody is out to, if they have delusions of persecution, which is actually a subcategory of schizophrenia, they may believe that their coffee's poisoned. And guess what? It's not an idea.
Right.
Everything in that chain of command will then follow that order. Their thoughts will then match, oh my God, someone's out to kill me. Their feelings will match that. There'll be a feeling of paranoia. And then their actions will follow that same course. Right. You won't see that person sipping peacefully that cup of coffee. They'll be there. You'll see it in their eyes. You'll see it in their body. And they won't even be there because that will bring them harm. And that is the governing belief that has impacted all of those aspects of the person.
Right. There is a Zen thing, and I don't recall exactly if it's from Wonhyo Desa or elsewhere. It's the idea that there are no roadways through the great ocean, and yet we traverse it. Mm-hmm. There are no steps or ladders in the sky, and yet birds take flight on a path, etc., etc. And so there is no way, really, or there are no steps to enlightenment. We've mentioned the 7 steps of enlightenment. 3.
And I'm going to write my book, which is 6 steps. Gotcha beat.
There you go. But there are steps to enlightenment. But they're steps of no steps in a sense. So Shin, He, Heng, Jung are the steps, if you will. Mm-hmm. And Shin being belief.
Yes.
He is then therefore the acquisition of knowledge, the wisdom. The Heng then is the activity of the putting the thing into practice, putting it into motion, and then Jung is this seal of approval. It's your diploma, your driver license, your certification of any kind, right? When a student enrolls in college,
yes,
they have to believe that they're going to graduate eventually.
That's within their reach.
Right.
That they have the capacity, and that goal is within their reach.
And so then they wake up on a daily basis. They wake up, they go, they do the thing. Why? Because behind it sits, and it's the wind in the sails is the belief. And then eventually you get your diploma, which is your proof of persistency through that's powered by belief. What I see, and take it how you want it, in child rearing, I see sometimes parents who really want to explain the truth of the matter to their children. And they're so fixed on this. I don't tell my children stories. I tell them exact truth as it is. And the dismissal of the capacities, we're not ever going to get into that, but the idea that a child as a person then who grows up has never, for the lack of a better word, practiced belief.
Yes.
And then we're asked, you have to believe in yourself. How? I've never exercised the muscle, because the idea of belief is something that is, to simplify it, maybe something that is not yet, but I will. And so you have to envision, you have to have an imagination, and you have to envision the thing that isn't, Wright brothers and
Yeah.
inventors and things of
All
that
the
nature.
medicine.
It's in the hands of belief. I mean,
I have a saying, and I use the Wright brothers for that saying, is the person that had to see it to believe it stood on the sidelines and watched the Wright brothers believe they can fly.
I'm glad you bring that up, because pardon me, but if there was ever a more silly and absurd a statement as I will believe it when I see it.
You missed it.
I mean,
Too
it's
late.
an oxymoron, for one, right? If you see it, that's not believing then. That's you now know. So I will know when I see it is true. I will believe it when I see it is not true. The definition here of belief and knowledge or experience, if you will, is completely different.
Yeah.
And so to say I'll believe it when I see it is an absurdity. It's a ridiculous statement.
Right. That's why there are so many missed opportunities that come to people that strictly adhere to that philosophy, and that becomes a governing principle in their life. When you look at any new movement, they typically call it a grassroots movement. Why? Because when you plant a seed, right, you don't see any action. There's no activity. There's no sprout there. All you look and see is dirt.
Right.
And in the early stages, when there's nothing there, there's nothing tangible, the people that jump on board are only the people that believe truly in that project, in the mission of that project. Because when you look, you just see dirt. Like, what are you guys doing? There's nothing going on there. And there have been so many examples of people that missed the boat. I think, I don't know the exact name, but there's that story of the gentleman that was part of the Apple team in the early stages with Steve Jobs. And he sold his stock very, very early on. And he oftentimes gets knocked because it's like, man, if you just would have stuck around like everyone else, that stock that you had, if you believed in the project, your worth would have been 100 million times more.
And so we could say, philosophically speaking, right, that is the thing, to say I'll see it when I believe it, that means you can't travel anywhere. If you haven't been there before, then how do you go to a place that you've never been to, in a sense? It's belief is the way that we operate in the world. Like I said, it's been sort of hijacked and utilized seemingly only in the religious context.
Isn't that a little sad too? It makes me a little sad when you describe it that way. You're referring to a parent earlier talking to their kids that way. I've never seen it. Dad, does such and such exist? I've never seen it. How do you know that's not just the extent of your experience? Whatever wall, right? And then you have now that child, which is budding with the full potential of anything in life. You've now put that kid into a box solely because that didn't come to you in your lifetime.
Yeah, the little kid is playing with, say a toy car, and he's driving his toy car around the carpet on his imaginary roads, and all of a sudden he takes off and is flying, and a parent sits by and says, listen, cars have wheels because they drive, they don't fly. So you keep the wheels of your car on the road the way that this is exactly why I don't have flying cars yet. Because every parent with the wisdom of their own grandiose experience has imparted onto their child not the things that ought to be imparted, how to be a good human being, this sort of home education, but the technical education or the technical knowledge of the parent. And we all have shortcomings. Everybody has shortcomings, but to then pour onto, and of course this is all we have, so you impart what you have, but we have to be cautious in 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 trampling things, like you said, in that potential genius of the child, and to trample and bulldozer and flatten it out with our big boots of life experience, usually with some flavor and seeds of already having been jaded by existence and beaten down, and personal disappointments and failures are in there. They sneak in consciously or unconsciously, subconsciously. Episode number 7, all about subconscious. So this idea of allowing for belief to exist without our thought that everything must be explained, then you explain away invention, you explain away wonder, you explain away awe. And again, this is, a good scientist believes.
Yes.
I believe that a good scientist believes.
Right.
They go to the lab, they go to their research, whatever it is that they do. Why? Why would you? I mean, unless you're one of those people that just goes and just logs in hours to get the paycheck, then you're just a worker, maybe not a pursuer, not a researcher, maybe that kind of thing. And maybe I'm being a little harsh, and I hope people don't take it that way. What I'm saying is that in the heart of the researcher, there's a belief that we can find whatever it is, with the cure for such and such disease, or a solution to such and such problem, that yet hasn't been frequently found. And that's why we're doing all the work, all the scientific pursuit, all of the research, all of that hard work. And that whole Edison thing, I think it was, I didn't fail 1,000 times. I just found 1,000 ways not to do it. Think about each one. There's a persistence, and that persistence must be governed by belief. In fact, that's what its heartbeat is.
It fuels perseverance. If you don't have that, I oftentimes tell this to students when they want to pursue higher degrees like a master or a doctorate. If you don't truly believe two things: number one, you're capable of achieving that, and number two, the value in the doctorate, you have to see the value in that goal. Because if not, the second you enroll in one of these higher degrees or or in college, you're going to be faced with some kind of a challenge. And it's almost like a mathematical equation. If the pressure, the resistance that's being thrown at you outweighs or outdoes your driving force, you're going to succumb to that weight that's in front of you. And the only way that you're going to push through that hardship and push through those nights where you just don't have it anymore to continue is if you go back and you hunker down and you go back into the depths of your heart and soul, and you see that you believe no matter what, you can do this, and all of this work, all this effort, whatever you sacrificed, because it's always going to take sacrifice, it was all worth it. When you feel like it was worth it, you push through.
Yeah, it makes you overcome difficulties. It is belief. It's at least deep inside is what's there. So the first step to action is belief. In that Zen context, in that Zen saying, like I said, the first thing is we believe that the thing we are pursuing is reachable. We believe that the thing we are after exists, for one. It is the first step in every action. Whether it's a conscious thing or unconscious thing, still, this is the mind and the heart and the soul moves in that way. Then, through the action, like I said, through the hard work, through hunkering down and doing what you need to do, this is where the acquisition of the experience is. So as we're forward moving, We do the work. If we contextualize it in Zen, you do your meditation, you do your training, you do your practice, and your life becomes lighter, happier, and you keep going that way, and you acquire wisdom, and this wisdom then governs your next behavior. So it's a chain reaction. It's not just that the one thing keeps on going. They're links, connected links. If you want to think of it in terms of that imagery of the Indra's net, where it's a big net, and at each point where it's tied, there's a diamond, and that diamond reflects all the other diamonds, and if you tug at it here, that kind of thing. So this idea of putting the thing into work, being birthed initially by belief, being put into work, then we get the experience. From that experience comes the wisdom, and then we get the certification. And the more lofty the certification that we're pursuing, the more stronger the belief must be, usually. And then we get into this kind of slippery slope within Zen, where the things that seem to contradict everything in our sensorial experience is what we are after. And this is where I think the Western interest in Zen lies, and this is frequently where the big snagging hooks are within this idea of self and no self. Kind of, we touched briefly upon it. And the Buddha himself says that for one who fixated himself on the idea of emptiness or void or whatever you want to call it, even the Buddhas can help him, because we the belief in a thing, and I'm kind of overlapping some other episodes here, but this is what we do, right? The belief in a self, in a physical self as the only self, we could inspect it with our we could make a thought exercise of it, and we could unbind from it. But how do you unbind from the binding that is no binding?
Right.
Which is this idea of emptiness and whatever that people get so entangled in and flap around in this net of it. So just to echo some of the other episodes, stop it.
Well, yeah, I think, for example, when it comes to the body, and belief in health is one of my favorite topics, actually, because then you get into these topics of placebo, nocebo, which are the positive versions and the negative versions of what you believe, and how it governs and functions within your body. And it is a very, very powerful function of the mind, right? But when referring to the belief about the self, if you just believe, it's a very sad life if you just put yourself into the box of this is solely who I am and what I am, right? Because even it's ingrained even in our language. Raise your right hand. Right. I'm going to hypnotize you now. Okay. That was a hypnosis test. You agreed to my suggestion. Now close your eyes. No, but your hand. We don't say raise hand, right? You know where I'm going, right? And so, yeah, that right there, even in our language, it's referring to, yes, this is just a part of the self. It's not the soul self, because then when you encounter any kind of tragedy, if you're encountering sickness, for example, or pain, if it's your pain, then understand that you are experiencing this. You are not that. And there's a freedom that if you can tap into that, right? It's built into our language. So many people miss it. Even there was a movement several years ago in psychology when it came to labeling a person as schizophrenic, for example, we don't say that anymore. We say a person with schizophrenia because, again, when your mind just shrink wraps around some label and you believe, well, this is the extent of
The
who I am. These are the four walls in which I am. I that governs who I am. Then there's no escape. There's no freedom. But listen to the language, right? This is your body. What's the your that holds this body?
Who's this you?
Yeah. Yes. There's all these things tying together. Zen fits in very well there, and there's a freedom there of freedom from suffering, if you can tap into that.
And perhaps it is the work of religion where it has made people want to, because this division almost, right? Like the belief is this silly childlike thing. Oh, you just believe the thing, you believe anything, blah blah blah, and in the search for some certainty, and you hear the arguments against believing in whether it's God, whatever. It says, oh, you want a comfortable blanket. There's no such thing as this and that. All these things have been conjured up. They're fairy tales for the adults. And the argument then is why? Oh, because it brings some sense of peace and certainty. And so, we're not walking around all, just vibrating and caffeinated and panicky about, the reality of life, because the reality of life is X, Y, and Z. And so then the belief is then pinned against what that kind of person might say is the certainty. And pardon me if I'm wrong here, but certainty gives you the certainty, and you're certain that your way is the way. You're certain that of your perspective. You're certain of your point of view. You're certain of your thing, and so your certainty gives you peace and comfort, and it's a fairy tale. So we could have a certainty of the fairy tale, and the certainties are constantly evolving. So if we really look at it closely, every scientific breakthrough, there's no certainty in it, in a sense. The certainty is momentary aha moment. Woohoo! Right? And then what do? We keep on going. We keep on going. So it's a momentary celebration of some discovery, and this is not a certainty. The discovery and the celebration is for just my mind has been enlightened to some new understanding. I had an aha moment. We celebrate it. So it's a personal journey in a sense, and collective if it's something that is broader in its implications. But so we have these woohoo and aha moments, but we continue forward moving on this heartbeat of belief.
It's no different than school, right? You graduate 8th grade and you're like, woohoo! Then guess what? You get to freshman year in high school. Yeah, when you look downward, 8th grade down through pre-K.
Right.
But when you look forward, guess what? There's a whole new world that you now have to explore. So enjoy, but also be humble, because there's more learning. It's never ending, right? Yes. There's more learning to be done.
And this is the never ending element is it's a wonderful thing to consider, because ending would be sort of to die.
Yeah.
But to die is not to end either. Everything is never ending in a sense. So there's a continuum.
I know a guy who said that 2,500 years ago.
Right.
Siddhartha.
Well,
good old Siddhartha.
Perhaps
that guy was onto something.
Perhaps this is not the episode, but Dr. Ian Stevenson famously has that a big.
Oh, I want to do a whole episode on that. Yeah, but we have to
of reincarnation and the children and the recollection of their lives and things,
which reaffirms that life is continuous. But
it says that, right? Yeah. So you believe if you want to believe. You don't believe if you don't want to believe. I could tell you this. I immigrated here when I was 12-ish, I think. And when I came here, we've had TV. We didn't live in a cave where I came from, right? But consider, if you will, maybe some tribe somewhere, living nakedly in a forest.
Mm-hmm.
And now you take them and you helicopter them or fly them over into a New York skyrise with hot running water and a jacuzzi and air conditioning and heating and what. I mean, tell me that person doesn't say, "Wow, I've died and this is now heaven."
This is heaven, yeah. Heaven on earth. They found it.
And so this idea of belief as the first step, it is a belief as the first step that then gets renamed experience or gets renamed understanding or wisdom or what have you. Wisdom is not... there are varying definitions of wisdom, at least within Zen tradition. One definition of it is a little bit more transcendent.
Yeah.
Right? Where I have the wisdom of foresight, and the wisdom of, in a sense, the wisdom is and without getting into Shintongyok, which is the kind of what powers, supernatural powers, if you want to call it that, but they're not supernatural, they're natural. But anyway, the idea of wisdom as the ability to see the outcome of one's actions, the kind of causality, and it is, we all do it. I mean, if I throw a rock at this camera, it's going to break it or knock it over or what have you. So there's that foresight, and I have the wisdom to see into the future in a sense. But it is based on only my experiences. And if I've never experienced a camera that's maybe, designed for extreme sports and gets rocks and things pelted at it all the time, it might do nothing to this camera. So we are governed by belief, whether we like it or not, whether we contextualize it in some organized fashion or not. But you don't wake up, frankly, you don't go to sleep, if belief is not some... And when we call this the 5 roots also, within Zen tradition we call the 5 roots are these things that are innately existing in every body. Everybody has it. But as you were talking about the seed and the grassroots, the roots, why are they roots? Because they're beneath the soil. You cannot see it. When they sprout, when they break out into, if you will, into the conscious mind, then they are seen as a sprout, etc., etc.
Exactly.
But prior to that, they're unseen. But just because a thing is unseen doesn't mean it's not powerful. I mean...
Yeah, I mean, we've had many cases.
Gravity is unseen in a sense. If you want to look at it that way. When we had the
pandemic, nobody can see COVID and wiped out almost, 2 million, 3 million people. Radiation is unseen, and I don't know anyone taking, vacations to Chernobyl. So I think across the board, we understand that just because it's unseen to you doesn't mean it's not real, and it doesn't mean it can't impact you.
And just because that's it's an important point to highlight, because someone might say, well, we can see COVID when you look at it under microscope and whatever, but that's like
you can see it under the microscope. You can't be in a room and say, I see it right now.
Unseen to who, like you said.
Unseen to who.
Unseen to who, and unseen by what machinery, if you will. And perhaps in the future, we really are in an era where technological development really has kind of exploded. I mean, I just heard about the AI therapists.
Oh no, we're not going there.
Well, but
I'm starting to boycott now.
Well, they and then I believe it was in the University of Zurich, if I have it correctly. Uh, a study was done that found that AI was showing symptoms of anxiety. I don't know if you've seen that.
I think I read the headline.
Yeah, so the control was that the AI was fed the information from a vacuum cleaner manual, and then the other AI was fed sort of the information as it is fed by the world.
Mm.
And language, right, changes when you're depressed. Your language changes. You might be expressing the same. We both might be looking at that plant, and in fact, I was
the brown leaf just looks like it's dying.
right.
And I think I am too.
Right, and then if you're in love, that green, bright green, look at it coming to
so
life.
Beautiful.
And if you're a farmer, if you're a chemist, that needs potassium. That's why the colors are changing. I think we had gone on a hike with the Zen Center, and one of the members commented on, we had gone through I want to say it was at the Rutgers Gardens, that pine forest that's sort of a pine school, really. It's
like mythical almost.
Yes.
When you're there, you feel like you're in the Knights of
In
the
a
Round
fairy
Table
tale,
forest
right.
in a fairy tale, yeah.
But it's planted, right? So it's planted in these neat rows. It's kind of, too sterile in a sense. But so I believe it was in there. And there was one particular tree that was significantly stood out because it was crooked. All the other ones, pines generally tend to grow straight, and in particular, I mean, certain species are a little rambunctious and they don't want to, but there's a wisdom in the way that the tree, and especially what do you call it? Carnivorous. Conifers. Their branches kind of slope down, and they're perfectly straight to distribute the load when they're covered, because they have needles in the winter, so they hold the snow. So there's a reasoning for its geometry, and that's why they're very straight, to make sure that the displacement of the weight of the snow. But this one particular, for whatever reason, maybe it was sickly, or maybe whatever happened to it during its growth, not unlike a child, when something happens, there's oppression during its growth, and it grows and then it corrects itself, but there's that bend, that the S shape there that stays with it. And after the trip, people commented on the general experience of the trip, etc., and these things. And one person commented on, like you said, that one uniquely deformed tree. It stood out so much to them that it was almost a fixation, and they were plagued by episodes of severe depression, generally speaking, and this mirroring was there, that they identified perhaps with that one single tree that all the other trees aren't, and this one single tree, and that kind of thing. But we digress.
They saw themselves in the tree.
Yeah.
It's almost like a world Rorschach test.
It is, yeah. And it is, we believe, and what we believe we impart unto the world. So this is a two-way street to some degree, but I would say more so it's a one-way street. I think in the last meditation class I spoke about clouds, and I had kind of, it's time for Ango, which is the meditation retreat season, and the in between the Ango, I kind of come out from my under the rock
From the cave, from the depths of the cave, to see
yes,
what's going on in the outside world.
to see what's going on in the outside world, and I take in some of it to be able to communicate like a human being. I try my best, and I was talking about clouds and how I think almost everybody as a child, they look at clouds and they're try to make out shape. We have that search for these anthropomorphic qualities. So that looks like a face, and it's got eyes, and it's a bunny, and it's a this, and it's a that, and so we imagine various things. And I said, and maybe that one's a Cybertruck, and so everybody laughed at that because clouds are generally speaking roundish. They're not as angular as it may be. And I paused for a moment because it was a teachable moment, and it was a teachable moment in the sense that so much in my current out in the world, the Cybertruck thing is coming up and up and up again, and I could care less either way. I'm not judging anybody's choices, whatever you do, but it seeped into my psyche sufficiently enough that it was included in it was meant to be kind of funny because clouds aren't shaped, in angular ways. And so think about it. That is how our minds and that which we diet on, it really is projected onto the world. And someone said exactly that, what you said. It's like a big Rorschach thing, right? We look at reality, and the truth of the matter is, what we're trying to do within Zen is to actually look at reality. We don't look at reality. We look at the content of our mind. We look at the screen that the eyeball is, onto which, like those new AI glasses, where it's got print on the inside of it, right? This is how we see the world. So this invention, quote unquote, if you will, of the AI glasses with the screen that your eyeball could see, but you're also seeing the reality as is.
That's not new.
It's not new.
Humans have been distorting reality since
we crawled out of the muck. Yeah. It really is that. It's the same principle. We look at reality through our AI lenses, and the AI has been fed the information that I have been fed throughout my life, and then I see not what is, but what I imagined to be. And if you believe sufficiently that person's out to get you, they are out to get you.
Oh, yes.
If you believe that world is in this way and that way. And so to maybe start circling back and kind of tying it all neatly, belief is a thing that is. It's a thing that we do. In what context we do it, and where the topics of it or the interests of the belief, we believe in what, that varies. But in terms of its governing principle in our life, it's there.
And I want to give a message also that it's something that you should actively be aware of and try to train it. You referred to Ogun, the 5 roots that every person has, and when I think of root, I think, well, how do you make it sprout, right? Or how do you make a flower or fruit? You have to nurture that root. You have to feed that root, and I believe that Zen is the training ground for people to learn to first identify what are the governing beliefs that are leading them into these pitfalls and these traps and this revolving door of misery and suffering. Because when you understand that it is your belief that can literally change your outlook on life, then you have to train your mind to shift or to see the positive, see the way through, find hope. And if you don't train that, then you're just going to, again, be that hamster on that wheel, continuously crashing up against that same problem or hardship and feeling like there's no way out. And there's a story that my grandmother told me, and I think it highlights this point. And the context is in a hospital institution, And there's this patient, we'll just call him patient A for the case of example, that's been in his room for many years now. And he looks out the window and he is discontent with the view from his window. All he sees are smokestacks and gray skies. And then on the other side, there's, we'll say, Mr. Jones. This patient, he can hear him talking loudly and laughing and saying how wonderful it is when he looks out his window, right? He sees the rolling hills and the beautiful blue sky and the birds chirping and the flowers blossoming. And so patient A also happens to hear one of the hospital employees say that, oh, Mr. Jones is finally being discharged. And so he calls in the hospital employee and says, hey, excuse me, can I move into Mr. Jones' room? And the hospital employee says, yeah, sure. You know, you've been here a long time. You've been a good patient. And we'd help you move into that room. And so when the time comes, patient A moves into that room and he's so excited. He can't wait to look out that window. And he raises up the shade and he looks and he sees, it's a brick wall. And he's like, wait a minute. He calls in the hospital worker and says, excuse me, wait. I didn't want this room. I wanted Mr. Jones' room. You know, the one with the beautiful rolling hills and the blue skies. Oh, that's what Mr. Jones said he saw? He goes, yeah, that's what Mr. Jones saw. So this cannot be his room. And he goes, oh, you don't know? He says, oh, Mr. Jones
was blind.
He was blind.
Nice.
He didn't look with these meat eyes, which cannot see past misery. He looked with the eyes of his heart, which can cut through suffering and look at the root of happiness and joy and peace. And so this is something that I think people need to work on and train, because sometimes there's this rubber band effect where we just get pulled back into the cogent quanium, these habitual ways of seeing the world with limitations. And of course, negative things stand out, right? You turn on the news, like you were saying earlier about Cybertrucks, all the negativity is what stands out. Sometimes in our inner world, those are the things that make the most noise.
Yeah.
But we have to learn to quiet that. And then we can have the freedom to choose what we want to hone in on and what we want to focus.
Yeah. So belief is a thing.
Yes.
It does its work whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And training it. How do you use any tool?
Yeah.
So we don't become the tool. You know, if it's unconsciously done in a way that it largely is, we are the tool at the mercy of it. And if we don't choose to train it, if we don't choose to access that control panel, if you will, then we are there for the ride, and we're definitely not behind the steering wheel. And so, absolutely, belief is a real thing. It's there for you if you know how to use it. It's there in you, and we just stumble and operate in ways, whatever, if we're not consciously have taken the time to see what actually the working of it is. So, until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. If you have questions or comments, please do let us know. If you'd like to support the podcast to offset the cost of the platforms, etc., we appreciate that. Of course, also, thank you for listening. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. I'm Young Ansunim.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Ruben Lambert. From my heart to yours, I want to wish everyone some happiness in their life and some peace. And please subscribe and like. And if you heard something today that you feel that it tugged on the strings of your heart, that you learned something new that can better your life, please share it with others. Thank you very much.